Hello everyone, today I'll discuss how China's hydropower stations attracted 1.2 trillion renminbi in investments, significantly boosting the economy. I'll also uncover why the US backed down during previous tariff negotiations. It was due to a major supply cut in rare earth magnets, and high tariffs had little impact on China's exports to the US. President Trump has shown strong preferences and dislikes toward countries around the world, imposing high tariffs on most of them. He even threatened some countries that they could retaliate with tariffs against the US, but the US only made concessions to China. Recently, China released its trade figures for the first half of the year, finally unraveling the mystery behind the US's concessions. The most crucial factor was the supply cut of rare earths and rare earth magnets. A Reuters article on the 20th noted that in June, China's exports of rare earth magnets to the US surged to more than 7 times the amount in May. This marks a strong recovery in the supply of these critical mineral components, needed for electric vehicles and wind turbines, after the US and China reached a trade agreement. As the world's largest producer of rare earth magnets, China saw its exports of rare earth magnets to the US soar to 353 tons in June, an increase of 166% compared to May. Overall, besides the US, China also relaxed its exports of rare earth magnets to countries around the world in June. In June, China exported 3,188 tons of rare earth magnets globally, a significant increase of 1,057.5% compared to May's 1,238 tons, but still a 38% decrease compared to the same period last year. If we look at the entire first half of 2025, China's exports of rare earth magnets are still down by 18.9% compared to the previous year. China accounts for over 90% of the global supply of rare earth magnets, and in early April decided to add several rare earth products to its export control list in response to US tariff measures. Just look at the numbers. China's supply of rare earth magnets to the US in May dropped to below 50 tons, which is just a fraction of a normal month's volume. At the same time, China is tightening its supply to the rest of the world to prevent other countries from smuggling rare earth magnets to the US, and also to stop other major economies from selling out China's interests when negotiating with the US. Just with rare earth magnets alone, China has already put a stranglehold on the US. If Trump doesn't back down and this drags on for another 2 months, America's auto manufacturing and military industries will face widespread shutdowns. Aside from the killer move of rare earth magnets, China's exports to the US have shown remarkable resilience, even at the peak of the tariff war when the US imposed extremely high tariffs of up to 145% on Chinese products. Barron's website published an article by He Wen, executive director of the China Society for World Trade Organization Studies. Recently, China's General Administration of Customs released import and export statistics for the first half of the year, contrary to expectations abroad. Even though Trump wielded the heavy stick of tariffs against China in April and May, it barely impacted the strong momentum of China's exports. In the first half of the year, China's exports grew by 5.99%, a significant acceleration compared to before Trump started the tariff war in 2018. However, China's exports to the United States have been hit. In the first half of this year, China-US trade suffered a significant decline, with China's exports to the United States dropping by 10.6%. Most of this decrease occurred in the second quarter. In March, Trump announced a so-called fentanyl tariff of 20% on Chinese goods, and on April 2nd, he imposed an additional 35% so-called reciprocal tariff, bringing the total tariffs up to 54%. After the Chinese government firmly fought back, Trump became furious and kept raising tariffs, eventually reaching 145%. This caused a sharp drop in China's exports to the US in April and May. In April, China's exports to the US fell from $40 billion in March to $33 billion in April, and then dropped further to $28.8 billion in May. This is a 34% decrease compared to the same period last year. On May 12th, during the China-US Indo-Pacific meeting, an agreement was reached. The US side revoked the additional tariffs, bringing tariffs back down to the 30% level, and China correspondingly canceled its retaliatory tariffs. As a result, in the second half of May, China's exports to the US rebounded rapidly. In June, China's exports to the US rose back to $38.7 billion, though this was still 14.9% lower than the same period last year. Over the entire first half of the year, China's exports to the US were down by 10.9%. Why did such a significant drop in China's exports to the US not affect China's overall exports? That's because China's exports to markets other than the US generally saw a clear increase, which was indeed enough to offset the decline in exports to the US. In H1, China's exports to the EU grew 6.6%, to ASEAN by 13%, and to Belt and Road countries by 9.6%. These gains offset a 10.6% drop in exports to the US, resulting in an overall 5.9% growth in China's exports for H1. Among all these figures, I think it's truly surprising that at the peak of the US-China tariff war, China's exports to the US in May only dropped by 34.4%. At that time, the US had imposed an additional 145% tariff on Chinese products, which in theory is already above a prohibitive tariff level and should have made trade between the two countries impossible. But not only did China's exports to the US not drop to zero, they didn't even fall by half. This fully demonstrates how tightly the US is connected to China's supply chain. The US relies heavily on Chinese products. If they don't buy from China, the US can't find substitutes quickly, or alternatives are even more expensive than Chinese goods with high tariffs. So, they must keep buying from China. Looking at statistics up to last December, there are 500 products that the US imports 100% from China, and another 2,165 products for which the US imports between 50% and 99.9% from China. These two categories, which can be considered highly dependent on Chinese imports, already account for 24.1% of the total value of US imports from China. Take rare earths as an example. For 9 types of rare earths, the US imports 100% from China. And in the US defense industry, which involves over 1,000 types of weapons, 87% of the rare earths used are sourced from China. So, to sum up the US's reliance on Chinese supplies, first, when China drastically reduced its supply of neodymium magnets to the US in April and May, only easing up in June, the US couldn't even last a month or two under those circumstances. Second, even under the 145% high tariffs imposed by the US, China's exports to the US in May only dropped by 34%, and China's overall exports still grew. In this way, China could keep playing the high tariff game with the US for another 6 months. One side can't drag it out, while the other isn't afraid to, which results in China having a much stronger negotiating position than the US. So Trump had no choice but to give in. But other countries don't have this kind of preparation or strength, so it's much harder for them to negotiate with the US. On another note, whenever China's economy slows down a bit, a massive investment project suddenly emerges from within the country. On July 19, China announced a 1.2 trillion yuan investment in Tibet to begin construction of the Medic hydropower station on the lower Yarlung-Tsangpa River. Concurrently, a new central state-owned enterprise, China Yajiang Group, was established to carry out this hydropower project. This massive hydropower station is planned to have 5 cascade power stations, with an installed capacity reaching 70 and 61 kilowatts, which is equivalent to 3 gorges and 5 Baihetan. 10 years for the project, with annual power generation of 300 billion kilowatt-hours, it is the largest hydropower station. How significant is this hydropower station? A single set of data can tell the whole story. According to the National Energy Administration, by the end of 2024, China's installed power generation capacity reached 3.35 billion kilowatts, a 14.6% year-on-year growth. Hydropower installed capacity was 440 million kilowatts, with only 3.2% growth. Hydropower's growth rate has bottomed out, far lower than solar photovoltaics at 45.2%, wind power at 18%, and nuclear power at 6.9%. It's even less than thermal power's 3.8%. However, Matua hydropower stations' installed capacity will account for 21.2% of China's total hydropower capacity since founding. It will greatly boost the growth rate of hydropower installations. The hydropower station is located on the Yarlung-Tsangpa River, which originates from the Jimyangzang Glacier on the northern slope of the Himalayas and runs for 2,075 kilometers within China's borders. After leaving China, it is renamed the Brahmaputra River, flowing through India and Bangladesh before emptying into the Indian Ocean. At its exit from China, the annual water flow reaches 140 billion cubic meters, making it China's third largest river by water volume. The mainstream's theoretical hydropower potential reaches 80 million kilowatts. Especially in the Great Bend area in the lower reaches, from Pai Town in Millen County, elevation 2,900 meters, to Basika in Matua County, elevation 155 meters, there is a massive drop of over 2,700 meters within just 50 kilometers straight. This is considered the world's most hydropower-rich area, accounting for 1/6 of China's total hydropower resources, second only to the Yangtze River. The Matua hydropower station has officially started construction, and I am very optimistic. I believe this massive hydropower station is already driving China's economic growth. Citibank reported this project has macroeconomic significance. Estimating a 10-year construction period, it's expected to boost China's investment growth by 0.23 percentage points in the first year, and increase China's GDP growth by 0.09 percentage points. Citibank said that this will accelerate policy implementation at a time when downward pressure on China's domestic economy is becoming apparent. The launch of this project also provides support on the demand side, helping to ease the pressure on economic growth and employment. The electricity generated by this project will also drive the coordinated development of the regional economy, and its benefits to the real economy go far beyond that. With the commencement of this monumental project, some Indian media have expressed concerns. During the India-Pakistan military conflict this year, India threatened to cut off water from 2 rivers flowing into Pakistan, which drew widespread international attention. However, China has long made it clear that the hydropower project on the lower Yarlung-Tsongpa River will not harm India. China insists on being friendly and cooperative with its neighbors, does not seek unilateral maximization of interests, and will never do anything that harms others for its own benefit or pits neighbors against each other. Water hegemony is not an option for China. China has addressed transboundary water resource issues with a responsible attitude and pragmatic approach. Japan's economy struggles, its political situation remains unstable, populist parties are rising, and the Liberal Democratic Party suffered a historic defeat in the House of Councillors election.